pulled into his driveway after 2 weeks away, exhausted from the red-eye flight from Seattle. His mother had suffered a stroke, and he had been at her bedside through the worst of it. She was stable now, thank God, but he was desperate to get home to Linda, his wife. She had early-onset Alzheimer's, and 2 weeks apart felt like an eternity. The house was dark. That struck him as odd. It was only 8:00 in the evening, and Linda usually kept the living room lights on. He grabbed his suitcase from the trunk and headed to the front door, fumbling for his keys. That was when he heard it, a faint thumping sound, rhythmic and desperate, coming from somewhere inside the house. His heart stopped. He shoved the key in the lock and burst through the door. The sound was clearer now. Someone was banging on something, and there was a muffled voice, hoarse and weak. It was coming from below, from the basement. He dropped his suitcase and ran to the basement door. It was locked from the outside, padlocked with a heavy-duty lock he had never seen before. The thumping grew louder, more frantic. "Linda," he shouted, his hands shaking as he searched for something to break the lock. A cry came from the other side, weak, desperate. His wife. He ran to the garage, grabbed a crowbar, and pried that lock off in 3 violent yanks. The door swung open, and the smell hit him first. Urine, sweat, and something sour. He flicked on the light and nearly collapsed. Linda was at the bottom of the stairs, filthy, trembling. Her nightgown stained and torn. Her face was gaunt, her lips cracked and bleeding. She looked up at him with eyes that did not quite recognize him at first, confusion and terror mixing in her expression. "Robert." Her voice cracked. "Is that really you?" He was down those stairs in seconds, scooping her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. How long had she been down here without food, without water? "I am here, sweetheart. I am here." "I have got you." He carried her upstairs, his mind racing. Who did this? How did this happen? He laid her on the couch and grabbed his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. As he gave their address to the dispatcher, he looked around the house. Everything seemed different. Furniture had been moved. There were boxes stacked in the corner he had never seen before. Linda's pill organizer was gone from the kitchen counter. The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they checked Linda's vitals, severely dehydrated, malnourished, early signs of hypothermia despite it being September, he stood there in shock, trying to piece together what had happened. "Sir, when did you last see your wife?" one of the paramedics asked. 2 weeks ago, he said. He had left her with their daughter. Emily was supposed to stay with her while he was in Seattle. His mother had a stroke, and his voice broke. Emily did this. The paramedic exchanged a glance with her partner but said nothing. They loaded Linda onto a stretcher. I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand, whispering that she was safe now that I was sorry. So sorry I had left her. At Riverside General Hospital, they admitted her immediately. A nurse pulled me aside while the doctors worked. "Mr. Miller, I need to ask, has your wife been locked in that basement for the entire 2 weeks you were away?" The question hit me like a freight train. 14 days. My Linda trapped in that cold, dark basement for 14 days. I do not know. I whispered. I just found her like that. A police officer arrived an hour later. His name was Detective Adam Reynolds, Chicago Police Department Elder Services Unit. Yes, there is actually a specialized unit for this. I sat in the hospital waiting room and told him everything. "I am Robert Miller. I am 67, retired from a career in civil engineering. My wife Linda is 64. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. It has been progressing slowly, but she can still do most things with reminders and routine. She knows who I am. She knows our daughter. She just gets confused, sometimes forgets where she put things, loses track of time. Our daughter Emily is 40. She is a CPA at a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago. She married Mark 4 years ago. Mark calls himself a business consultant, but I have never been entirely clear on what he actually does. He is always talking about cryptocurrency, NFTs, passive income streams. I never liked him, if I am being honest. But Emily seemed happy, and that was what mattered. 2 weeks ago, my mother in Seattle had a stroke. My sister called me in a panic at 3:00 in the morning. I booked the first flight out. Emily volunteered immediately to stay with Linda while I was gone. "Dad, do not worry about a thing," she said. "I will take care of Mom. You just focus on Grandma." I was grateful, relieved even. Emily knew her mother's routines, knew where all the medications were, knew how to handle the confusion and the sundowning that came with the disease. I called every day from Seattle. For the first week, Emily answered, "Mom is fine, Dad. We are watching her favorite shows. I am making sure she eats. Do not worry." But during the second week, the calls went to voicemail. She texted instead, "Sorry, busy with Mom. She is good. Call you later." But she never called back. I tried calling Linda directly, but her phone went straight to voicemail too. I told myself it was fine. Emily had it under control. My mother needed me. I stayed in Seattle. Detective Reynolds listened to all of this, taking notes. Then he asked the question that made my blood run cold. "Mr. Miller, during those 2 weeks, did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" "No, absolutely not." "Did your wife sign any documents that you are aware of?" "Not that I know of." "Why?" He closed his notebook. "We will need to investigate further, but, Mr. Miller, this appears to be more than just neglect. We will be in touch." Linda stayed in the hospital for 4 days. They rehydrated her, treated her for malnutrition and exposure, and ran a battery of tests. She kept asking where Emily was. "Where is Emily?" "She was just here. She was making me lunch." No, sweetheart, she was not. On the second day, while Linda was sleeping, I went home to look around more carefully. I needed to understand what had happened. What I found made me physically ill. The basement door had been padlocked from the outside. There was a bucket in the corner. That was what Linda had used as a toilet, a thin blanket on the concrete floor. No food, no water. The light bulb had been removed from the socket. My wife, who sometimes forgets what day it is, but who can still laugh at silly jokes and loves watching the Chicago Cubs play, had been locked in darkness for 2 weeks. Upstairs, I found more disturbing evidence. Emily's laptop was still on the kitchen table, password conveniently saved. I am not proud of what I did next, but I looked through her files. What I found was methodical, calculated evil. There were scanned documents, power of attorney papers, with Linda's signature, real estate documents, bank statements, and a file labeled Investment Opportunity. Mark's Fund. I sat there for an hour, reading through everything, my hands shaking so hard I could barely click the mouse. Here was what they had done. The first week I was gone, Emily had taken Linda to a lawyer's office, some sketchy notary in Cicero, not our family lawyer. She had had Linda sign POA documents using her Alzheimer's confusion to convince her it was just paperwork for Dad. The notary apparently did not ask many questions. Linda's signature was shaky but recognizable. With that POA, Emily had accessed our bank accounts. She had withdrawn $80,000 from our savings money we had carefully set aside for Linda's future care as her Alzheimer's progressed. She had also taken out a home equity line of credit against our house for another $120,000. We had owned our home in Lincoln Park outright for 25 years. Now we owed the bank $120,000. All that money, $200,000, had been transferred to something called Lakeside Capital Partners. 3 clicks later, I discovered that Lakeside Capital Partners was Mark's company, a numbered corporation registered just 6 months ago. Its business was cryptocurrency investment and blockchain consulting. In other words, Mark was running some kind of crypto scheme, and they had used my wife's confusion and my absence to fund it. But here was the part that made me want to vomit. They could not let Linda talk to me. If I had called the house, Linda would have told me something was wrong. Even with her Alzheimer's, she would know something was not right. So they needed to keep her quiet. Their solution was to lock her in the basement. I found a text exchange between Emily and Mark from day 3. Mark: "She keeps crying for your dad." "This is not going to work." Emily: "She will forget. Give it another day." The confusion helps. Mark: "What if someone checks on her, Emily, who dad is in Seattle?" Mom's friends have not visited in months because of her condition. We are fine. They had planned this. They had knowingly locked a confused, vulnerable woman in a basement to steal her life savings. I called Detective Reynolds immediately. He came to the house with 2 other officers. I showed them everything: the laptop, the documents, the text messages, the state of the basement. Mr. Miller Reynolds said carefully, "This is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and unlawful confinement. We will need your wife's testimony when she is able, but there is more than enough here for charges." "Where is my daughter now?" I asked. "We do not know yet." "Do you have an address for her?" I did. Emily and Mark lived in a condo in Wicker Park, about 20 minutes away. Detective Reynolds made a call, and within an hour, officers were dispatched to their address. They were not there, but what the officers found in that condo would lead to even more charges. The place was nearly empty. Furniture was gone. Closets cleaned out. But in the trash, and this was where they got sloppy, officers found bank statements, paperwork for one-way tickets to Costa Rica, and a printed email from a property management company in San Jose about a 6-month rental. They were planning to run, take the money, and disappear to a country with no extradition treaty for financial crimes. But they had left too much evidence behind, and they had underestimated how quickly I would return. My mother's recovery was faster than expected, and I had come home 3 days earlier than originally planned. If I had stayed in Seattle for the full 2 weeks as planned, Linda might have died in that basement. Emily and Mark would have discovered her body, played the devastated daughter, and been on a plane to San Jose before anyone asked questions. Detective Reynolds was blunt about it. "Your early return saved your wife's life." That realization that my daughter, the little girl I had taught to ride a bike who had cried in my arms when her goldfish died when she was 7, had been willing to let her own mother die for money. I could not process it. The manhunt began. Chicago police issued warrants for Emily and Mark. Their faces were on the news within 72 hours. Daughter and son-in-law wanted in an elder abuse case. The media had a field day. My phone would not stop ringing. Reporters, neighbors, people from my old workplace reaching out. I ignored all of it. My focus was Linda. She was released from the hospital on day 5. Still weak, but recovering physically. Mentally, though, she was confused. She kept asking where Emily was. "Is Emily coming for dinner?" she asked. "No, sweetheart. Not tonight. Did I do something wrong? Why will she not visit?" How do you explain to someone with Alzheimer's that their daughter is a monster that the woman she gave birth to, raised, and loved had locked her in a basement to steal from her? I could not. So I just held her hand and said, "Emily is busy right now, but I am here. I am not going anywhere." On day 7, Emily and Mark were arrested at O'Hare International Airport. They tried to board a flight to Miami, Florida, their first stop before connecting to Costa Rica. Border services flagged them immediately. Detective Reynolds called me within the hour. "We have got them. They are in custody." I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just emptiness. The charges came down like a hammer. 2 counts of elder abuse, 2 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, 2 counts of unlawful confinement, 2 counts of fraud over $5,000, and 1 count of forgery related to the POA documents. Mark faced additional charges related to his investment fund, which turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. He had taken money from at least 28 other investors, all elderly or vulnerable people, promising 35% returns on cryptocurrency trades that never actually happened. He was just shuffling money around, paying old investors with new investor money. Classic fraud. The Crown attorney assigned to the case, a sharp woman named Patricia Lopez, met with me a week after their arrest. She laid out the case in detail. "Mr. Miller, This is one of the most egregious elder abuse cases I have seen in my career. The premeditation, the exploitation of your wife's cognitive condition, the financial devastation they caused. This is serious. We are pushing for maximum sentences. How long, I asked. Elder abuse with unlawful confinement combined with the financial exploitation. We are looking at 9 to 13 years for Emily, 11 to 16 years for Mark because of the additional fraud charges. And the money. Patricia's expression softened. That is going to be harder. Mark's fund is bankrupt. The money is gone, spent, moved offshore, or paid to early investors to keep the scheme running. We will pursue restitution orders, but I want you to be realistic about recovery. In other words, the $200,000 was gone. Our savings, our home equity vanished into Mark's crypto scam. I asked the question that had been haunting me. Did she know Emily? Did she know what Mark was doing was fraud? Patricia opened the evidence file, based on the emails and texts we have recovered. Yes, she knew. She helped him recruit investors, including 2 of her co-workers from her accounting firm. She created fake financial statements for the fund. She was an active participant. My daughter was not a victim of her husband's scheme. She was a co-conspirator. The bail hearing was painful. Emily's lawyer argued for release pending trial, no criminal record ties to the community, low flight risk, despite the Costa Rica thing. The Crown argued the opposite. Clear flight risk, destruction of evidence, ongoing danger to Linda. The judge sided with the Crown. Bail denied. Emily and Mark would remain in custody at the Chicago South Detention Center until trial. I attended that hearing. I sat in the back row and watched my daughter in an orange jumpsuit plead with the judge for release. She cried. She apologized. She said she had made a terrible mistake. When she saw me, she tried to mouth something. Dad, please. I stood up and walked out. I could not look at her. The criminal case moved forward, but I was not content to wait for justice from the courts alone. I hired a lawyer, Daniel Carter, a partner at a firm that specializes in elder law and estate litigation. His advice was clear. Robert, you have grounds for a civil suit. Sue them for everything they have taken, plus damages for what they put Linda through. Even if they do not have assets now, they might in the future. Inheritance earnings property. Lock it down. I filed suit 2 weeks later. Emily Miller and Mark Davis defendants. Claims financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion breach of fiduciary duty. Damages sought $200,000 in stolen funds, plus $220,000 in additional damages for Linda's suffering. But there was more to do. I contacted the Illinois Board of Certified Public Accountants. Emily had used her credentials as an accountant to lend legitimacy to Mark's scheme. Her co-workers from the accounting firm had trusted her professional judgment. She had violated every ethical standard of her profession. I filed a formal complaint. Within a month, Emily's CPA license was suspended pending the outcome of the criminal trial. If convicted, she would be permanently disbarred. She would never work as an accountant again. That should have felt satisfying. It did not. It just felt necessary. The months that followed were a blur. Linda's Alzheimer's worsened. Stress accelerates cognitive decline, her neurologist told me. She stopped asking about Emily, which was somehow worse than the questions. It was like her brain had erased her daughter as a protection mechanism. I hired a full-time caregiver to help with Linda while I dealt with the legal proceedings. The bills were piling up: medical expenses, legal fees, the mortgage payments on the Helilock we never wanted. We were drowning financially, and the people responsible were sitting in jail awaiting trial. The preliminary hearing happened in January, 6 months after Linda's rescue. I testified. I walked the court through finding Linda, through discovering the documents, through realizing what they had done. Emily's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim too manipulated by Mark, desperate for money, suffering from her own mental health issues. It was garbage, and the judge saw through it. Ms. Miller, the judge said you are a trained accountant. You understood exactly what you were doing. You exploited your mother's cognitive vulnerability for financial gain. There is no mitigating factor that excuses that. The case was bound over for trial. Trial date set for June, 9 months after the nightmare began. But before the trial, something unexpected happened. Mark's lawyer approached the Crown with a deal. Mark would plead guilty to all charges and cooperate fully in testifying against Emily in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would testify that Emily had been the mastermind, that she had planned the whole thing, that he had just gone along with it. It was a coward's move throwing his wife under the bus to save his own skin. But Patricia Lopez called me to discuss it. If Mark testifies, we have an airtight case against Emily. His testimony combined with the evidence guarantees a conviction and a strong sentence. What do you think, Will? He served time, I asked. Yes, we are offering 9 years with eligibility for parole after serving 2/3. He will be in prison for at least 6 years, realistically longer. And Emily. Without the deal, she would face trial. And there is always risk with a jury. But with Mark's testimony, we would push for the maximum 14 years. I thought about Linda still asking sometimes why Emily does not call. I thought about those 14 days in the basement. I thought about the life savings gone, the home equity gone, the trust gone. Take the deal, I said. Mark pleaded guilty in February. The sentencing hearing was brief. He expressed remorse. I am sure his lawyer wrote every word. The judge was unimpressed. Mr. Davis, you participated in a scheme that targeted vulnerable elderly individuals, including your own mother-in-law. You prioritized profit over human dignity. 9 years in federal prison. 1 down. Emily's trial began in June. It lasted 3 weeks. The Crown presented the evidence, the POA fraud, the bank transfers, the basement, the texts planning the Costa Rica escape. They called Linda to testify. That was the hardest day of my life. Watching my confused, diminished wife try to explain what had happened to her. She kept getting mixed up, forgetting details, asking if she could go home. Emily's lawyer tried to use that confusion to suggest Linda could not be a reliable witness. But then the Crown played the video. The police had taken video of the basement the day they had executed the search warrant. That dark, cold space, the bucket, the thin blanket, the scratches on the door where Linda had tried to claw her way out. The jury watched in silence. 2 of them were crying. Mark testified next. He laid out the entire scheme, how Emily had approached him with the idea, how she had researched the POA laws, how she had found the notary who would not ask questions, how she had planned the timeline around my trip to Seattle. It was all her, he said. I just did what she told me to do. Even if that was partly self-serving, the evidence backed it up. Emily's laptop showed she had been researching power of attorney elder exploitation and countries without extradition weeks before my mother's stroke. She had planned this. Emily took the stand in her own defense. It was a disaster. She tried to claim she had been trying to help us, that Mark had manipulated her, that she had never meant to hurt anyone. The Crown destroyed her on cross-examination. Ms. Miller, you texted your husband. She will forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. You were referring to your mother. What were you hoping she would forget? Silence. Ms. Miller, you locked your mother in a basement without food or water for 14 days. You stole her life savings. You planned to flee the country. And you want this court to believe you never meant to hurt anyone. Emily broke down crying. The jury was unmoved. Deliberations took 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was 2 months later. I submitted a victim impact statement, 6 pages detailing what this had done to Linda, to me, to our lives, how we had lost not just our money, but our sense of safety, our trust, our family. Linda tried to submit one too, but her Alzheimer's made it impossible. Her neurologist submitted a letter instead, documenting how the trauma had accelerated her cognitive decline. The judge read through everything. Then she looked at Emily. "Ms. Miller, you are an educated, intelligent woman. You understood the vulnerability of your mother's condition, and you exploited it without conscience. You betrayed not just her trust, but every standard of human decency. This court sees no mitigating factors. Emily Miller, you are sentenced to 14 years in federal prison." I exhaled. It was over. But it was not. Not really. The civil suit settled a month later. Emily and Mark were jointly liable for $420,000. Of course, they do not have that money. The court put liens on any future assets, wages, or inheritance. If they ever have anything, we will get it, but realistically, we will never see that money. The restitution order from the criminal case says they owe us $200,000 plus interest. Again, good luck collecting. The house. We managed to refinance the Helilock into our mortgage, but we now have payments for the first time in 25 years. We will be paying this off for the rest of our lives. Linda's care costs are climbing as her Alzheimer's progresses. Insurance covers some of it, but not all. I am looking at possibly selling the house within a few years to afford memory care. Emily is at Midwestern Women Correctional Facility about an hour west of Chicago. She will be eligible for parole in 9 years. Mark is at Rock River Federal Prison, a medium-security prison near Rockford, Illinois. His parole eligibility is in 6 years. I have not visited. I will not visit. As far as I am concerned, I do not have a daughter anymore. People ask me sometimes if I regret pursuing the charges so aggressively, if I wish I had tried to work it out as a family, if I think 14 years is too harsh. Here is what I tell them. Emily locked her confused, terrified mother in a basement for 2 weeks. She stole everything we had saved to care for Linda in her final years. She planned to let Linda die and flee the country with the money. She did all of this knowingly, calculatedly, without conscience. 14 years is not too harsh. It is mercy. Linda does not understand where Emily is. Sometimes she still asks. I tell her Emily is away for work. It is easier than explaining the truth to someone who will not remember the explanation anyway. Last month, Linda forgot who I was for the first time. She looked at me, really looked at me, and asked who I was and what I was doing in her house. It only lasted an hour before she recognized me again. But it has begun the final stage. I think about that sometimes, how Emily stole not just our money, but our time. The time Linda and I had left before the Alzheimer's took her completely. We should have spent those 2 weeks together. Instead, Linda spent them in hell. That is what I cannot forgive. The money can be replaced eventually. The house can be sold. But those 14 days and all the days after that were stolen by stress and trauma and fear. Those are gone forever. So no, I do not regret the 14 years. I would do it again. Justice is not about revenge. It is about accountability. It is about saying loudly and clearly that some things are unforgivable. My daughter learned that the hard way. I hope everyone watching this story learns it the easy way. Your family's trust is sacred. Break it, and do not be surprised when the consequences break you in return. As for me and Linda, we are still here, still fighting, still together. That is more than Emily wanted for us, and it is more than she will have for the next 14 years. And honestly, that is the only justice that matters.